On this Thursday night, Russia now claiming control of Mariupol. The West says not so fast.
There is no evidence yet that Mariupol is completely fallen.
Who is still trapped in the city, the weapons on the way, and Russia's newest sanctions against Canada on the path of healing.
We can't change history, but we definitely can change the future.
What happened when the Manitoba Métis Federation met the Pope? What do you get? The woman who has everything.
It was done in a spirit of love and gratitude.
A Canadian artist's gift for the monarch. Plus, smart cookies with separation anxiety.
And I think we went through about 20 boxes of Oreos.
A sweet batch of experiments to break apart the mystery of a beloved snack.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We are watching events in Ukraine closely again tonight, in particular the besieged port city of Mariupol. Russia claims it is now in control there, though that is being disputed. The mayor accuses Russian troops of hiding war crimes, of picking up the bodies of civilians killed in the streets and dumping them in mass graves. These satellite images show what appear to be trenches of newly dug mass graves next to an old cemetery just outside Mariupol. The mayor estimates more than 20,000 residents have been killed since Russian forces began attacking. The U.S. today promised more weapons to Ukraine, $800 million in lethal aid.
This package includes heavy artillery weapons, dozens of howitzers, and 144,000 rounds of ammunition to go with those howitzers. It also includes more tactical drones.
President Biden says the weapons will be sent directly to the front lines. It is obvious Ukrainians need the weapons right now. Jackson Proskow has our top story tonight.
These are the lucky ones. 79 people, just 3 busloads, able to escape the siege of Mariupol. The Russians were bombing us from day one, says this woman. They are demolishing everything, just erasing it. Yet for a second straight day, attempts at a large-scale civilian convoy out of the city failed. Ukraine blamed Russian forces. The Russian onslaught has decimated the Ukrainian port city, once home to 400,000 people. Ukraine's President Zelensky estimated 120,000 civilians are still trapped. The situation is bad, he said. In Moscow, President Vladimir Putin claimed Mariupol is now firmly in Russian control. Before the cameras, he then ordered his defense minister not to attack the sprawling steel mill where thousands of Ukrainian soldiers and civilians remain holed up. Instead, Putin insisted on a tight blockade, effectively sealing them in. Invite all those who have not yet laid down their arms to do so, he said, as he promised to guarantee their safety. For the women and children trapped underground in the maze of tunnels, conditions are bleak. If it weren't for the Ukrainian soldiers, we'd have no food, says this mother.
It's questionable whether he does control Mariupol. One thing for sure we know about Mariupol. He should allow humanitarian corridors to let people on that steel mill and other places that are buried under rubble to get out.
In Washington, President Joe Biden announced the swift deployment of more U.S. military aid. Long-range weapons meant to help Ukraine beat back the Russian offensive, now focused in the country's east. The U.S. will also provide more direct funding to the Ukrainian government and a program to help welcome refugees to the U.S.
We're in a critical window now of time where they're going to set the stage for the next phase of this war.
As they have throughout the 8-week-long conflict, Ukraine's civilians will continue to face the brunt of what comes next, a war with no end in sight. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
Russia's foreign ministry has banned 61 more Canadians from entering the country. 5 Canadian premiers have been added to the Kremlin's so-called stop list, along with the mayors of Toronto and Ottawa and several federal government and military officials. A handful of Canadian journalists are also banned from Russia, along with the heads of 3 media organizations in the country. The Kremlin also sanctioned 29 more Americans today. It calls this a response to the ever-expanding anti-Russian sanctions imposed by the West. Police are searching for a suspected arsonist in Victoria after the home of a Ukrainian priest was set on fire. The priest and his family were asleep inside the home next door to the Ukrainian Catholic Church in Victoria. His wife says she witnessed someone pouring gas through the mail slot, and the flames were already spreading fast by the time the family got downstairs. The priest managed to run out the back door. She and their 3 young daughters were forced to jump from the second-floor window. The priest says his family has never known to be the target of threats.
This was a shock, and especially that it wasn't an accident, as you can tell. It wasn't like someone just, oops, it happened, sorry about that. It's someone, it was targeted for whatever reasons.
Police are looking into whether there's a connection between the fire and the family's Ukrainian heritage and are asking the public for any information. Another delegation from Canada was at the Vatican today, meeting with Pope Francis to tell him in person about the terrible legacy of residential schools. The Manitoba Métis Federation made their own trip to Rome, separate from the larger delegation of Indigenous leaders and elders who visited last month. As Marney Blunt reports, the Pope asked for forgiveness.
We can't change history, but we definitely can change the future.
Hope, revitalization, and forgiveness. Messages at the core of Thursday's meeting in Vatican City between the Red River Métis delegation and Pope Francis. The Pope asking for forgiveness and expressing shame for the abuse and lasting trauma inflicted by the residential school system. David Chartrand, who accepted the apology on behalf of the delegation, calls it a powerful start to healing.
Although we can't go back and change it, he understands the damage that was done. And he asked for we in that room and the Red River Métis forgive him and the church. So he took ownership of it.
A unique papal visit as the delegation emphasized the connection between the Red River Métis and the Catholic Church.
We need to overcome this pain and move forward because we do need the church. We need to be able to connect spiritually.
2 survivors sharing personal stories of the abuse they endured in Catholic-run residential and day schools, highlighting the role Christianity plays in Métis communities and the need to restore those broken bonds.
I have some very, very fond memories as a child going to church and to going to the different seasonal events through the church and following the word of the Lord. That being said, we also suffered at the hands of individuals who misappropriated their authority and abused the children, and that should have never happened.
The delegation presented the Pope with gifts, including a beaded cross and slippers, signifying the need to walk forward together.
We want him to walk with us. We want him to be with us. We want him to see and understand, but to support us as we go forward. Never give up on us, and we won't give up on them.
Pope Francis has already committed coming to Canada in July. While there's no word on whether or not Winnipeg will be a stop on that trip, the delegation is hoping he'll come here to bless the gravesite of Métis leader Louis Riel. Marney Blunt, Global News, Winnipeg.
There is a 24-hour crisis line available for anyone experiencing pain or distress as a result of their or a loved one's residential school experience. The number is toll-free, 1-800-721-0066. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met with Inuit leaders in Ottawa today to finalize a policy to recognize the homeland of the Inuit people. Inuit Nunavut comprises most of Canada's north and would be recognized as a distinct geographical, cultural, and political region.
There will now be a foundation of knowledge that we will expect from federal departments and from those who have to work on Inuit issues or who have Inuit considerations in their portfolios. And we can build upon that foundation instead of start anew across all federal departments.
The Inuits say this policy is transformative and important to respecting Inuit self-determination and will affect positive change for years to come. There are new developments tonight in the investigation into the death of an Edmonton high school student. Karnveer Sahota was attacked at a bus stop on April 8th, and he died of his injuries a week later. Police say 7 young people have been arrested and were initially charged with attempted murder. They will now face upgraded charges since the boy has died. Sahota, who was 16, was attacked outside his high school while he was waiting for a bus. An autopsy completed on Wednesday determined he died from a stab wound to his chest. Well, there are thousands of people across Canada waiting for surgery right now. The system is backlogged because of COVID-19, which messed up schedules for just about everything. And hospitals already operating at peak levels were overwhelmed. As Jamie Mauracher reports, some Canadians who can afford it have chosen to get their surgery outside the country, paying big bucks to bypass long wait times.
Patricia Rush has no problem moving through this springtime snow now, but 6 months ago, the 60-year-old could barely limp.
The pain was excruciating. When I would walk a certain way, I'd get this sharp pain in my leg.
Rush required a total hip replacement. Before the pandemic, she was told the wait for her surgery in Alberta was 15 months. Once COVID hit, the timeline only grew.
I had to do something. I am a very active person, and I had no life.
She found a clinic a world away in Lithuania. The wait time there, just 2 to 4 weeks. For $16,000, she booked her flights, surgery, and rehabilitation. Paying for procedures in foreign countries has become increasingly popular in the pandemic. Out of 46 countries, the Medical Tourism Association ranked Canada as the #1 surgical destination worldwide. But that's for private clinics only. And the prices here are steep. That hip replacement, for example, can cost upwards of $30,000 in Canada's private system. Toronto emergency room doctor Lisa Salomon says those waiting on Canada's universal healthcare system often pay their own price.
It does impact their life and their life expectancy.
Last year, Canadians faced a median wait time of just over 25 weeks between referral and receiving treatment. That's the longest wait time ever recorded by the Fraser Institute, and a 175% increase from 30 years ago when the average was just 9 weeks. Waiting on surgery for her hip, Maureen Johnston was told it would be up to 2 years. Wanting to get back to her active lifestyle sooner, the 63-year-old retiree opted to speed things up, spending $14,000 and booking abroad.
It dips into your retirement savings, but what's the point of having them if you're living in pain?
Patricia Rush can relate. She's glad she took her health into her own hands because 3 years later, she's still on a Canadian wait list.
I spoke to one of my doctors and I said to him, what do people do when they're in this kind of pain? They must be suicidal and depressed. And he said, absolutely both.
A problem, she worries, is being swept under the rug, putting the lives of Canadians on hold and at risk. Jamie Mauracher, Global News, Toronto.
Surgical backlogs are a problem across the country. Tomorrow, Jamie looks at solutions to tackle the long wait lists and why some frontline staff say it's time for hospitals to take matters into their own hands. A Canadian low-cost airline is making some internal changes as it faces the risk of having its license suspended. Flair Airlines says it's reducing the level of U.S. influence on its board of directors, reducing the share of seats held by its Miami-based business partner. The company is under review by the Canadian Transportation Agency. A preliminary hearing last month found the Edmonton-based airline may not meet Canadian ownership requirements to fly in the country. Flair's CEO is dismissing calls by 2 airline associations representing Air Canada and WestJet for Ottawa to reject its request for a temporary exemption from Canadian ownership rules.
These guys have been ripping off the Canadian public for decades. For decades. You all know it. You all sit there when I go out and listen and talk to people, everyone's complaining about the duopoly. So don't be surprised that they get defensive when a company that's genuinely efficient at providing low-cost airfares comes into the market.
Flair has until May 3rd to respond to the Transportation Agency's concerns. Britain's Prime Minister and Partygate coming up, the new investigation into whether he misled Parliament about gatherings during lockdown. China's biggest city, Shanghai, has extended strict COVID-19 lockdown measures a day after easing rules in some districts. Cases are rising in areas now outside the city, not under quarantine. Beijing insists its zero-COVID policy of strict lockdowns, mass testing, and lengthy quarantines has kept deaths low and avoided the public health crises that engulfed much of the rest of the world. And life in Hong Kong is slowly returning to normal after that city relaxed COVID-19 restrictions that have been in place for 4 months. Gyms, restaurants, museums, and Disneyland are open again. This was the worst wave of COVID-19 in Hong Kong. Nearly 1.2 million people are known to have been infected since January. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's troubles aren't over. He will face a House of Commons inquiry into whether he lied to Parliament about parties held at 10 Downing Street during lockdown in 2020.
The question is, as on the order papers, many of that opinion say aye. Aye. On the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
MPs approved a motion to launch the inquiry once the police investigations into 12 gatherings at Downing Street are finished. Johnson, who's on a trip to India, had tried to delay this vote. Some of his own MPs say he should resign. Earlier this week, Johnson apologized in the House of Commons. He says he has absolutely nothing to hide. Johnson was fined for breaching lockdown rules after telling MPs no rules had been broken. Ahead, a Canadian artist's royal tribute to the Queen on her birthday. Well, if you have a head for heights and steep stairs, this is for you. London's Westminster Abbey is allowing tourists on the rooftop this summer for the first time in its history. It's a chance to see the Gothic architecture of the Abbey up close and get some great views of London. Westminster Abbey is where Queen Elizabeth married and where her coronation took place 70 years ago this year. It's hard to fathom how many world leaders the Queen has outlived and outlasted over those 70 years and how many people she's met. Today, on her 96th birthday, Redmond Shannon has the story of one Canadian who met her as a boy and has never forgotten what the monarch means to him.
From birthday salutes and horse parades in London to birthday serenades in Windsor, the Queen herself marked the day much more quietly, flying off to Sandringham Estate, a favourite residence of her late husband, Prince Philip.
And it's a charming touch that the Queen has decided to spend her 96th birthday where he used to enjoy living.
On this birthday in her Platinum Jubilee year, the tributes keep on coming from admirers everywhere.
I can still remember her there shimmering in her mint outfit and her white hat with her silver shovel. It was a lovely thing to see.
It was 1976 when Owen Grant Innes saw the Queen plant a tree in Halifax.
The Queen has always been an icon in my life.
The Canadian artist says being young and gay in those days was isolating, but the Queen always inspired him.
And I think, like every child, our world is very small. But through the Queen, I realized I was part of something bigger.
When Innes recently became a dual British-Canadian citizen, he reflected again on what the monarch means to him, painting portraits of a life of landmarks for a new book. The highs and the lows, like the difficult aftermath of Princess Diana's death.
So what I say to you now, as your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart.
As your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart. And I think that was such an honest moment, and it connected with me in my heart because I realized fully that her principal concern was protecting her two young boys.
Innes holds out hope Queen Elizabeth will receive the book. He sent it to the palace just in time for her birthday.
The little 5-year-old boy who fell in love with his queen, it would make him very happy for her to see this book because it was done in a spirit of love and gratitude.
Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Snacking for science next, the hard-hitting research to answer one pressing cookie question. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it is a potato-shaped moon crossing the face of the sun. NASA's Perseverance Mars rover captured Phobos, one of the red planet's 2 moons, eclipsing the sun in early April. Phobos is more than 150 times smaller than Earth's moon. Its transit lasts just over 40 seconds, much quicker than the typical solar eclipse we see of the Earth's moon. Well, people who like cookies, and who doesn't, right? No, there is more than one way to enjoy them. And when it comes to Oreos, there has long been a tantalizing mystery why you can't split an Oreo evenly in half. Well, a team of engineers at MIT is on the case. They've done extensive research on why the Oreo's cream filling seems to always stick to just one wafer. Yes, it's a real study published in a real journal and everything. Mike Drolet digs into the results with his own sweet study on how the cookie crumbles.
The makers of the Oreo cookie have made it clear over the years, if you separate their cookie, do it the right way.
Please don't fiddle with the Oreo middle.
A few years ago, there was even a contest to see if a robot could do it better.
Apparently, that is a big deal for humans.
It wasn't exactly a success. And then 6 months ago, engineers at MIT decided to take a run at it, with a twist. Lead researcher Crystal Owens wanted to challenge the Oreo way as the only way.
I feel like that's a debatable subject. My preference, I feel like the wafer on its own is a little bit too dry. So I want to have like a little bit of cream on both sides.
They hoped they could make science fun for kids by engineering the Oreometer, a device they created to put the perfect twist on a cookie. Alas, they failed, and Oreo traditionalists let them know.
Before I did this study, I didn't know those people existed, but I feel like they're very smug and satisfied right now.
Now, if we were to accept the MIT premise that there needs to be equal amounts of insides on each wafer, the Global News Science Lab has come up with a far more efficient method. Take one cookie, separate. Take a second cookie, separate. Take the extra wafers, discard. Voila, science.
That's too much cream.
Perhaps, but to do it her way wasn't happening. So in her conclusions, she offered the people at Oreo a solution. Put texture on the inside of the wafers to grip the cream. They haven't called her back. Oh, and by the way, many Oreos were harmed during this report. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
I think he ate a couple. That is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. We leave you tonight with a giant Ukrainian flag unfurled on the McDonald Bridge in Halifax, a gesture of solidarity with Ukraine. It's the first time a flag from another country is flown on the bridge, and it's expected to stay there until Russia's war in Ukraine ends. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on Saturday for the new reality. Bye-bye.